You are listening to ESL Talk, a podcast made for English teachers by English teachers.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of ESL Talk. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode with our new co-host, Faye, and we look forward to producing more content for you as we go on this season.
Yes, it's great to be back. And today's episode covers another topic a lot of teachers talk about. How do I find new students? What should I do to get new students? And how do I retain them once they are learning with me?
It's the $1 million question, right, Faye?
Right.
Yeah. As we know, with the acceleration of online learning, there's been a massive growth in students wanting to learn English, especially since the inception of the COVID pandemic. And there's a number of techniques and strategies that both myself and Faye can hopefully share with you today.
Yes, we will be giving a bit of an Instagram overview for recruiting students on social media based on our experiences on Instagram and YouTube as well. However, we will cover this a little bit more in our next episode.
Yeah, we do have a future episode all about social media specifically, but we will touch on it a little today. We'll also be joined by a special guest who is Suji, and she's a recruitment consultant for a number of language schools. So she works with different language schools, and she's going to share the approach that's taken at her level and share some knowledge and expertise in how you can also attract your own students.
Right. And as we both do some teaching online and work independently, perhaps we should discuss our approaches and techniques for retaining students, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, as we both have different student groups, we have different audiences and approaches. I think our listeners can hopefully learn a lot from our experiences. So Faye, as a self-employed ESL teacher with a massive online following, how do you recruit students?
Well, in my case, Instagram has been my number one marketing tool. Once I started gaining more and more followers, I naturally started getting more inquiries on tutoring and online courses. It kind of just happened organically and on its own. But it's also important to set up a website and newsletter for these cases as well. Having a mailing list really helps.
Right.
When students ask me for info on online teaching, just on Instagram, I always have somewhere to refer them to. So I just send them to my website for more information and to send me a form or something like that. And what about you, Daniel? What's your approach for attracting and retaining students? I think it's a little bit different to mine.
Yeah, I've had a very different kind of approach. Again, I think the way you've done it, I guess, was obviously you've put in so much hard work and time, but some of it's been organic. It's kind of snowballed, right? But right. I think for me, like the students that I teach online, I teach through a platform called italki. So essentially the students are coming to me, I'm not going to them. So it's nice in that way. Obviously, teaching there, they take a commission, which is understandable because they bring the students. But what I do with that platform is I make sure my teaching video, my description, all my information and my profile is as effective as it can be. And also, I do have some private students that I've obviously, picked up generally through word of mouth. And a lot of times from learning languages, I still take some time each week to learn Korean. And I find that from learning Korean, I've had other teachers or my teachers who I'm learning from refer me to their friends or colleagues or family, which is kind of strange. But again, as a language learner, I'm also getting students as well. So it's been a little bit of word of mouth, a little bit of working with certain platforms that kind of do the legwork for you. And then I do want to start increasing my presence online. It's very time consuming, as I'm sure you know, as you go with it every day. So it's something I want to increase more. And then also on YouTube, I've done just a few videos that I do for my university students. And that's also got a little bit of interest as well. So there's lots of different ways to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Faye, once you have students learning with you, how do you retain them? Because it's one thing to get the students, but how do you retain them and make sure they keep learning with you? Right.
Yeah. So that is the tricky part, and especially when you want to basically retain students from social media where there's no commitment. So one thing my new online course will include is access to an exclusive group on Telegram. It's a really popular chat tool nowadays, kind of like WhatsApp, if people are not familiar with it. But there's more things you can do with Telegram than you can with WhatsApp. And it's a great tool for keeping in touch with these students. They might want to take another course in the future, right? So you kind of market that. There's a good exchange because they get that direct contact with you, but then you also have that direct line to them for future content you might want to to launch.
Mm-hmm.
And for tutoring, I also find it helpful to offer prepaid packages of lessons. I think it's something that you do as well.
Yeah.
So there's more of a commitment, right? So it's not just like 1 hour here or there. You just kind of sell those lessons in bulk. So that's another good strategy.
Have you thought about having a Facebook group for your students where they all just join up then? Is that one idea?
That's a thing that I've thought about. Honestly, I don't have the time to manage it right now. But I've also I kind of think Facebook is dying out a little bit. And
Perhaps,
when I look at the people on Facebook, like at the current users, it seems to be a little bit off my target audience or my niche. So I haven't really taken the time to invest in it. But I think it really depends on what your niche is as a teacher and what kind of student you're trying to approach.
It's a really good point.
What about trial lessons? Is that something you think is good to get new students, taster lessons? Do you think it's beneficial?
Yeah, this is something you have to be a little bit pragmatic about, because a lot of the times, a lot of teachers are like, okay, I want to just recruit students, so I'll have a $1 trial lesson or a free trial lesson or whatever it is. And that's great. But a lot of the time you might just get students who just want to have an English lesson for free or an English lesson for $1, which is tricky because, students probably do genuinely want to improve, but money can be a big barrier for them. So what I do is I do have a slightly cheaper trial lesson. I do. And the way that I structure that is I work with the student. I present, okay, what is it that you want to improve? What's your goal? What's your target? And we'll set out over a course of 10 lessons or 20 lessons. Okay, here's what we're going to do each lesson one by one. Here's the homework. Here's the way you're going to be assessed. And I'll take you on that journey in that 30 minutes or that 45 minutes. And I'll get to know you. What are your interests? What are your hobbies? How do you learn best? And then hopefully by the end of the session, I can then say, great, you've got a total clear picture of what to expect from me. And in the next lesson, we're going to do this. We're going to try this. So I'll see you soon. And here's some homework to get you started. So hopefully that student goes away from that trial lesson and they think, wow, this teacher's organized. They've prepared. They know what I need. We've agreed on goals that we're going to work on together. They totally get it and they get me. And I think that's really important to make that connection.
So it's almost like a prep lesson that you're doing rather than a trial lesson.
I would say it's more of kind of a consultation or an evaluation.
Yeah. That's
like
a good
an interview almost in a way. But I think that way you really get to understand your student and they can understand you and how you work as well. What about for you, Faye? How do you personally market yourself to students and why is it important for your brand, especially with such a big presence on Instagram?
Right. Yeah. I like to focus a lot on my expertise. I don't think as teachers, it's really easy to just say, I teach anything and I can teach all levels, but I don't think that's really beneficial. It's good to focus on a niche or have your target. So in my case, my content is mostly geared towards upper levels and exam English or for people that are going to be living abroad. So it's more practical language. And I also focus a lot on my years of experience. I think that's a great asset once you have those. If you don't have that, it's no problem. You just find something else that sets you apart. And it's important to focus on that so that your students understand how you can help them specifically and why they should come to you over other teachers or other schools, right? What's your, let's say, selling point? And that's, again, why having a website is really helpful. And on that website, what I do is I include my student testimonials so that other students, like potential students, can see what exactly I do and how I have helped those people specifically, right? And do you have, I know that you do that kind of as well. And in general, like would you say teachers should do to promote themselves online? Are there any other tips or best practice for you?
Yeah, actually, I was on a forum the other day, and someone was asking this. They're just getting started teaching English, and they said, "What are the things I should do to attract students and hopefully, do this successfully?" So, the first thing, it's a little bit scary and daunting, but having a good video introduction. This is probably your biggest consideration because students can read a profile, they can look at a picture, and that might tell the story. But if you have a video where you can connect and urge students to take action and kind of lay out everything that you do, I think that's a really attractive and appealing way to get students to, learn with you. Obviously, editing, creating a video, getting kind of a plan of what you want to say, it's very time consuming and it takes a while. And, every kind of 6 months, I like to make a new video just to keep it fresh. And it's something I always keep putting off and off and off because it's going to take a long time. If you don't have, good editing skills, there's platforms like Fiverr or Upwork where you can get a professional video made and edited for you. It's not particularly expensive. I think they start from $20, $30 and you can have a really nice end result. In that video, sell yourself, highlight your strengths. Why should students choose you? Don't say, I have experience in teaching English to all learners. Well, 99% of English teachers do. Exactly. So what makes you unique? What can you offer that others don't? Now, again, that doesn't mean you have to be, mean or disparaging to others and say you're better than others. It's just, what is it about me that you might like or that you might enjoy learning with? For example, I might say that my approach is very organized, structured, clear, lots of examples, lots of opportunities for students to interact. That's my approach. Others might be more loose and just have conversational style. It just depends, what your audience is. And then the second thing to consider is the classes that you teach. So you might offer one type of lesson or 2 types of lesson or 3. I would say 3 is a maximum. Don't go beyond that. Because unless you're very experienced and you really know what you're talking about, then it's going to be a little bit diluted in your message. Your niche is not going to be clear. I do offer on the platform that I teach on italki, I do offer 5 different kinds of lesson, but I feel like I have enough experience to be able to do those well. But again, that might not be for everyone. So again, don't just say, we can do conversation practice. Well, great. How do you structure that? What tools, what resources, what materials, what's going to make your lesson better than some other ones? What qualifications, what experience do you have that makes it better than everyone else?
And I find that that's also helpful for you as a teacher.
Right.
To kind of limit yourself in that sense. Like set yourself some guidelines. Otherwise, it's just where do I start with this lesson plan?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. That kind of ties into the next point, package-based teaching or course-based teaching. So instead of just having a one-off lesson where you might just chat and say, okay, let's practice speaking for 1 hour for $10. Great. What does the student do with that? Again, maybe they just want to talk, and some students do want to do that. That's fine. But how about offering a structured course, working with students to help them reach their goals? Okay, you're going to move to America next year, or you have a plan to become a nurse in Canada next year. What skills do you need? What can we do? What can we add into that so it's more value for the student? So shifting from one-offs to course-based programs, that's really helpful, because you might get a little bit less money per lesson, but overall, if I'm getting 3 lessons at $20 versus 10 lessons at $18, then that's helping me secure that long-term income, long-term students. Hopefully, again, usually what happens, knock on wood, most of the time, is students who learn with me for 5 or 6 lessons, they say, hey, I have a friend or my brother or someone I met in this country. They'd like to learn with you. Can I recommend them? Of course you can. Yeah. So that's that step. One more step, personal information. Keep it simple, keep it clear. Make sure it's engaging and outlines exactly what you can and cannot do. Don't claim to say, I can help you to teach. I can help you speak fluently in 1 month.
Oh God, no. No one should ever say that.
Exactly. And when it comes to IELTS, I see it all the time. I can help get you band 7 guaranteed in 30 days. No, you can't. Don't be unrealistic, because then you're going to have students who are disappointed, who are sad and annoyed and frustrated, and you don't want to deal with that, and they shouldn't have to deal with that. So be honest, emphasize your talents, and talk about the results that you've got. That's a better way than saying, I can do this, I can't do this. Obviously, talk about what you're good at, but in the past, I've helped this student do this, or some students have managed to reach this score. And then like you mentioned on your website, and I do the same on my website, reviews. Promote, highlight recent reviews. If I have a review from Tom 10 years ago, it's not really relevant now. So ask students, again, don't beg them, don't force them to write reviews. But, after a few lessons, if you have a good relationship with that student, hey, would you mind leaving a quick review? Maybe just talk about what you like about the lessons. Why did you choose me? That's, I think, really useful and valuable.
I actually have a tip on that one. When I developed my website, I used Squarespace. I don't know if that's what people want to use, but it makes it really easy for you to add forms, and you can
Yes.
add a review form.
Right.
And you can hide that page so it's not public. So what I do is I send that link to my students, and it's the form asks exactly, how have I helped you? What have you achieved? What were your goals? So you're specific enough that it's not such a chore for your student to write. It's just basically filling out a form. And then you
Yeah.
have great reviews and content to use for your testimonials page.
Exactly. I think that's a really good point. And one more thing that I didn't mention, which I think is growing and is really useful. If your target market is adults, professionals, business people, LinkedIn is huge. And I know a lot of courses online are talking about using this, but it can be really useful, not necessarily for marketing and selling yourself, but just here's what I do, here's my work, here's some activities I've made, just to have that presence so that if an organization or a company or an individual thinks I need to brush up on my English or improve these skills, they know who you are, they're aware, and they can reach out that way as well.
Well, yeah, that's great. Like, thanks for sharing all that. There's some real food for thought there. But now let's take things to the next level and bring in our guest for today, Suji, who will share how she recruits at a professional level and the steps that she takes to recruit students for different global language schools.
All right. Hi, Suji. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yes, so excited to hear about everything you can do to better recruit students as ESL teachers. Thanks for coming.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you really, really so much for having me here. I'm just a tiny bit nervous to be here, but hopefully it'll be.
I hope so. So let's get started. The first thing we like to ask all our guests is, can you tell us a little bit about your professional journey so far?
Yeah, it's been very interesting. Where do I start? So I'm originally from Korea. I was born and raised there, and I moved to Canada in 2014. So that's about 8 years ago. And at that time, I had just graduated from university. So I didn't have any professional background whatsoever. I came here with just 1 year working holiday visa, which I'm sure a lot of listeners are familiar with. So it was just 1 year visa, which allowed me to work and like you could also study as well, but I didn't need the studying because I did the ESL studying prior to that. So I just came here, got a job as a part-timer at a language school. So I was doing like activities. I was a student services coordinator. So the activity coordinating and finding accommodations for the students. And so that's how I basically got myself involved in international education scene. And it just kind of like evolved from there. Like I started with the part-time job, and then it became full-time, and then I changed positions into like admin officer. And luckily, I know this does not happen to everybody, but I was very lucky enough to have such an amazing team, and the boss was amazing. She agreed to sponsor me for a work permit. So that also led me to permanent residency in Canada too. And then after that, I was really interested in like doing marketing and recruiting for international students. So I've been the recruitment manager for now about 5-6 years now. Yeah, so that's what it has been for me so far.
Great. Can I ask you more specifically, what interested you into this line of work, like working with students and recruiting them?
Very good question. I think it's mainly because I was once an ESL student before. About 11 years ago, in 2010, I couldn't speak a word of English, and then my mom was like, "Go to the States, like go to Seattle, learn English, and take some ESL courses." And I was like so scared, as anyone should, coming to a new country alone. And but that was like being in Seattle for about like 8-9 months was just like a life changer for me. It was very shocking to see that there's like different style of life outside. It was life changer. And ever since that, I've had that experience. I've always wanted to help out people who are in the same situation that I was, because I know how exciting it is. And
Mm-hmm.
also part of the reason why all the ESL teachers want to be an ESL teacher, because like you're teaching a language to the student, but also you yourself kind of feel like you're traveling all the time.
That's true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really true. And
Yeah.
I know what it's like being on the other side, because obviously, I was in Korea 10 years ago, which a long time ago. Yeah. And I know what it's like from the other side to have help and have support, and it's really useful and really valuable. So tell us a little bit more about your day-to-day role as a student recruitment manager. Like, what are you actively doing each day to help your organizations recruit and retain students?
I think a lot of it is just keeping in touch and reaching out and follow-ups, meetings, phone calls, emails. So it's basically, if in a nutshell, it's relationship building. Because I also directly deal with the students themselves, but also a lot of times I'm also dealing with the agencies. So those recruiting agencies, because I am in Vancouver. However, I need to recruit students from Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, and all these other countries. And the best way to recruit students from those areas is physically to be there. But because since I can't, we heavily rely on those recruitment agencies who are located in those countries. So so it's a lot of it is meeting up with them. Right now, it's a lot of Zoom calls, a lot of Zoom meetings, coming up with the strategies together to recruit more students. And once the applications come in, then I'm also helping with the admission part of the stuff as well. So I also, keep in touch with the students later at the later stage of the registration too.
Yeah, and that's interesting because that's kind of like how you do those partnerships and how you attract those students. But I'm curious about how you sell courses specifically. Like, how do you sell a specific course to a student, and how do you market that so that it interests them in the school and the course as well?
Yeah, that's definitely like the most challenging part of the marketing, because you got to know your audience, because you're selling the same. Like, for example, at my college, we have a nursing program, and our nursing program is not going to be popular in every market. So we find out who would be the good market, for example, like the Philippines or India, those, they already have a lot of nurses over there. So we would reach out more with our nursing program and then get more audiences from those markets. And if it's, for example, like Korea or Japan, then I would approach them with our IT programs or business programs or things like that. So I think the most important thing is to figure out your target and what they need, and go from there. I think that's the most important thing, I feel like.
Yeah, that is interesting. That's something we've talked about as well before, right, Daniel?
Exactly.
Knowing your audience.
And know your market and know kind of what their needs are and how you can meet those needs. Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of ties into communication. So obviously you're dealing with all these agents, you're dealing directly with students, you have all of these different people to communicate with. So that must be kind of a challenge at times. So how do you overcome these challenges when you're working with international students and agents and different parties from all over the world?
Yeah, it's basically the line of contact, communication is very clear. Like I either talk with the agencies or I either talk with the students. So it's very I can't even mix them both together. But I think for agencies, it's a lot of it is done by emails, and there's no. I would say one challenging part is maybe the language barrier when it comes to working with international students directly, because not everybody has the same level of English. So I guess that would be the biggest challenge. But other than that, there hasn't really been much of an issue with communication. But can you be more specific about what kind of communication that
so maybe a student has a question about the course or the program, or maybe they have a question about fees or how the course runs, what do they get out of it, those kind of questions. How would you deal with those?
Okay. So mostly I would do like, I would email. So email
Mhm.
is the main source of communication. And
Mhm.
if they still struggle, then I would ask to set up a meeting, set up
Mhm.
a Zoom meeting. Or if they're local, then I would just call them and just like talk it out and, go over the process. Because emailing is that you're still in touch with them and then you're talking to another person, but there's something inhuman about just like, emailing back and forth. So I like to
Mhm.
just like call them and, um, and just make sure that they remember my voice and just be more
Mhm.
personal. So I guess like adding that personable touch is always
Mhm.
Yes,
with me.
that's
Yeah.
great advice. I know, like as teachers, we really have to nurture that kind of bond that we have with our students and make sure we're being kind of supportive without being overbearing, and also
Mhm.
like making sure things are clear, because a lot of times things can get lost in translation, as I'm sure we all know.
Mhm.
So it's trying to kind of preempt that and also manage that so that that doesn't happen going forward. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, no, that's why I like what you said about emailing and adding that personal touch, because usually through email, it's things are very clear, right? And you can always refer back to what was said before. And
Mhm.
actually that kind of connects to what I'm going to ask you about. It's a little bit about expectations, right? What do you find students look for the most when it comes to studying English or learning English? Like, what do they expect the most?
Oh, okay. It's very different depending on the students. Some students want to see the results right away in like a month,
Mm.
but they're not, they're like beginner level. So that
Hmm.
could be really challenging when you run into those type of students. Um, but
How do
also,
you, sorry to interrupt, but do you, when you notice a student has that sort of unrealistic expectation, do you address that right away? Do you try to change their expectation
yeah.
before they make a deal with you, or before they actually buy into a course?
Yeah, absolutely. Because
Mm-hmm.
I also don't want to sell, something that we don't have. So I want to always be realistic. And I tell them that I don't always tell them what they want to hear, because once they get
Mm-hmm.
into the situation, they'll know like, oh, shoot, like, it's going to take me like 3 months instead of a month.
Mm-hmm.
So I usually kind of tell them that, look, it's not going to be an easy way. And also a lot of it has to do with the students' enthusiasm, like, how dedicated
Mm-hmm.
they are. They can't be speaking their native language all the time and expect to be good at English. So
Mm-hmm.
I usually tell them my example, because like I tell them the stories like from when I couldn't speak English too. And I
Mm-hmm.
told them, I just usually like tell them tips and advice on how I improved my English,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe it'll work for some students. And but yeah, students get a little frustrated if they don't see the results right away. But
Yeah.
I tell them like it comes with time. What I also tell them is that first year when they start learning English, that first year is when they see the dramatic improvement.
Mm-hmm.
After that 1 year, it's going to be very steady.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I give them all the advice that I could possibly give. And they're usually like, oh, very agreeable. They're like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
It's good to know. It's not always the case, but yeah, I think if you're honest and realistic and you kind of, share your experience, I think most people can kind of see the sense in that, and they'll usually be fairly open and open-minded
Mm-hmm.
about it and approach and see that approach.
I like that too, because I know we have a lot of listeners who are non-native speakers of English and teach ESL, right? A lot of non-native
Hmm.
teachers, they usually have even a personal stigma. Oh, I'm not a native speaker. I'm not ever going to
Right.
be as good as a native speaking teacher. But I think Suji just touched on a very good point. Like, you understand your student better than anyone because you've been there, right? If
yeah.
you teach English and you learned it yourself, like you can definitely relate to that. So that's a great asset. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also to add to what you just said about English teachers whose first language is not English, I have also run into a fantastic, excellent teachers who are like that.
Mm-hmm.
I used to work with this one Iranian teacher. She has a little bit of an accent, but still, like, for ESL students, they're not going to notice. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she knows what she's really good at. That was really good thing about the teacher. She's like, I'm going to stick with teaching beginner, elementary, maybe pre-intermediate level. And also students responded really well to that teacher too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Exactly.
really
Yeah.
good point. So yeah,
Mhm.
so just related to that, Suji, do you think students invest more in the teachers or the course or the school? What do you think they invest more in? Because I guess initially they don't know the teachers, but by the end, do they have kind of loyalty and appreciation for the school or the teachers, or both?
It's never really black and white when it comes to that. I think if I had to choose, it's the teachers that makes the school really great. But also school provides that, like the environment where the students can make friends, and, there's a social aspect of things. So I think they both have to be really, good to be going together with. But I think if I was a student, I would probably think a school. I would choose a school over a teacher, because in my experience, like meeting people and making friends, making connection was more important than, having a good teacher.
Absolutely.
Having a good teacher is good, but, also you need to have those, social environment as well.
I think that's great. I think you could be, and again, please feel free to chime in on this, Faye. I think you could be the best teacher in the world, but if you don't have the support of good resources, good materials, good lessons, engaging content, then it kind of falls down. But if you can have that mix of, a good kind of educational background or support or resources with those teaching skills, I think that makes it perfect. But what do you think, Faye?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially when you're starting out as a teacher, being part of a large organization like that, and having the support of admin staff and recruitment staff and all that is it's really important. And like you said, like if a student is studying internationally, they want the experience, right? So they're definitely that's gonna weigh more than just the teacher. But yeah, I guess it's a combination of everything for sure. And on that note, once your students are here, they've met their teachers, they've had their classes, right? How do you retain them? Like, do you have any tips or any advice, even for teachers who are just teaching on their own? What do you think is good to do or not to do to keep those students?
I think the most important thing to keep the students is always be available for them. Always be available for them and be someone to talk to anytime they want, because you have to put yourself in their shoes. Like, imagine you are going somewhere that you've never been alone. Having that support from the teacher or the staff is tremendous. Like, that's what will make your experience in a foreign country really great. And also that's how they will remember you too. So I always be friendly, be there for them, have an open door policy, basically have the students, like allow your students to, talk to you whenever they want, give advice. I think that's the most important thing. And also what not to do is probably not knowing their culture. Not knowing the culture of the student's origin, because I've had some very awful, I've heard some like horror stories where the teacher didn't really know about, certain things and certain rules about the country, and then, she went on and made some inappropriate comments in class, and that, that really made certain students feel uncomfortable. So I guess when you're dealing with international students, like knowing, getting to know different culture and like how to, like the manners and all that. I think that's important.
Yeah, those are great points. Yeah, I totally agree with making yourself available. I mean, for teachers, also, especially if you're teaching on your own or tutoring, of course, you don't want to give your student your private WhatsApp number to call you 24/7, but just telling your student when and how to reach you, and so that they know that they can. If they want, and then trying to respond as much as you can. You do definitely want to set boundaries, but yeah, like Suji said, just giving your student that availability, being open to that is really, really important to create that connection. What do you think?
Definitely. Daniel? Yeah. And getting to know the students, taking a little bit of time, tell us about where you're from. And then over time, eventually you'll start to make those connections more easily. And okay, this student's from here, so maybe they have these expectations, or they might be used to this, or they might learn better this way. I think that's really important. So definitely get to know your students, obviously professionally, and make sure that, you don't overstep the boundaries, and neither do the students, in terms of, you want to help your students, you want them to be successful, but like you said, Faye, you can't have them contacting you all the time. Generally, the approach I take is, here's my email. If you have a question or you need some support with the work, let me know. I'm happy to help. And of course, you might ask, how was your weekend? Or, try and keep building that rapport. I think that's really important for retention as well. So Suji, one last question to ask you today. If maybe, new teachers or those who are just starting out tutoring, or they just, have a few students, what advice would you give them on how to recruit new students and, some strategies that would help them to get more students for their teaching business or for their tutoring business? What do you think would work for them?
I would think social media, like utilize social media to the maximum level. I wouldn't go on every source of social media, because this gets so confusing. Like, I would say, I wouldn't be on like Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. Like, I wouldn't be on all those channels. I would choose my one pick and then just stick with it. So for example, YouTube is a great example, right? I know a lot of teachers who are already doing YouTube channels right now. And it all starts small, but also we were just talking about earlier, keeping that students and, making connections with the students. That could be your ambassador, like if you keep really great relationship with your students, it's always word of mouth. So, you can definitely keep in contact with every student that you connect with. And because that could be your ambassador if you were ever to like YouTube channels or anything like that. And maybe if you were to do that, like set aside some time to focus on your marketing strategies, like once a week or something like that. So, it's all about the investing your effort and time to make
this sounds very familiar, doesn't it, Faye?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, we do have we touch on this episode a little bit as well, but we have an upcoming episode on using social media to recruit new students. But Suji, you hit the nail on the head. Don't try to do it all, right? We're both proof of that. Like, I've had a lot of success because I focus on my Instagram platform, and Daniel has had success on YouTube focusing on that. So yeah, great advice.
Yeah, I'm not doing any social media, but myself, so I can't be the best person to give this advice. But just from what I have seen from the ESL teachers, I've seen some teachers being very successful that way.
That's awesome. Yep. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing those perspectives. A lot of the time we just talk about teachers. Like, obviously you're very heavily involved, but you have that very interesting perspective from being just alongside it, but not directly in it. So it's really useful to hear your advice and what you see from your perspective as well. So yeah, thank you so much for joining us today. It's really great to hear your experiences and your stories.
Yeah, thank you very much, Suji.
Thank you so much, Faye. Thank you so much, Danielle.
All right, that's all for this week's episode, guys. I hope you enjoyed this episode and now have a better idea of how to successfully recruit and retain your own students.
Yeah. And as always, remember to subscribe to receive the latest episodes, especially for series 2. You can follow us on Instagram at ESL Talk Podcast, or you can send us an email to esltalkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, if you're looking for advice or need some tips, feel free to reach out. We're happy to help.
Yes. And be sure to tune in next week for a brand new episode. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes and to follow us on Instagram and Facebook for even more ESL teaching content.